again for joining this presentation. And I will talk today about the biggest missed opportunity in data visualization, or in data communication, or in any kind of professional communication, not only data actually. And I also, in the last moment, I decided to change the title of this talk into from the biggest missed opportunity to how to suck less in professional communication. Because we all suck. I mean, I suck less because I'm a teacher and I'm an expert, but most of people suck even more than I am. So, you know, in any type of communication, it doesn't have to be data visualization, any kind of communication, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And this doesn't happen often. And that's why my claim is that most of you suck, but you don't have to, actually. We can improve, and there are some very simple steps that we can do in order to suck less and to improve our communication skills. So for those of you who don't know me, I am a data scientist. My name is Boris, and I work in different biotech companies. I worked at Automatic for like 6 years, 5 years. I still teach data visualization and database decisions at a college in Jerusalem. And today I work as a data scientist, as a freelancer data scientist for different companies. I have one of my customers is a biotech company that sits where I sit right now. It's called MyBiotics. I have several non-biological related companies as customers, and I actually enjoy my professional life. But I keep teaching and talking mostly out of passion. So I suppose that you have heard this phrase, communication is oxygen, and I hope that you relate to it and you believe in it as much as I do. I'm saying this without any drop of cynicism, right? But still, communication is a very big word, and one should remember that when you have a great principle, you have to implement it in a set of small steps, right? So saying that communication is oxygen is not enough. And I already said this, the main thing is to keep the main thing, right? So if you take a look at data visualization as only one subset, small subset of any type of communication, we can take a look at this graph and we can say that, okay, this graph is a piece of data communication, right? And now I would ask you, is this a good graph? And since we are a very small audience, what do you think? Is it a good graph? Yes?
No.
Why not?
There is no title to it. I read your abstract.
Right. So in theory, thank you, Demet. In theory, this graph is not a bad graph. It's clean. It has a very high signal to noise ratio. But the thing is that we don't know what is the main thing here, right? It looks like a neat graph, but it's just a graph. So if the main thing is to keep the main thing, this graph doesn't have any main thing at all. And the same goes here. This is a piece of technical communication. This is my ECG. And what is the main thing here? I have no idea. I mean, I performed this ECG 2 years ago. I am still alive. So I suppose that it meant that I was okay, but I don't know. I hope so. And this graph also it looks neat. It looks professional. Right? It has the right amount of dots and the right amount of lines. But again, the main thing here is absent. And this is what I'm about to talk in this talk. So I will divide this talk in 3 parts, like most of the talks they have to be divided in 3, even if they don't. So the first part would be why most of you suck, and then I will show you what we, like not only you, me included, what we busy professional people are usually doing and what we are supposed to do. And then I will give you some really short and simple tips and how to improve yourself in terms of data communication. So why most of us suck? And the thing is that becoming a data scientist is super easy. Everybody can be a data scientist, even I am a data scientist, right? And becoming a data engineer is also super easy, and a programmer is easy. Becoming a biologist is easy, and a statistician is super easy. It doesn't matter what you are. Becoming a professional is easy. Like, it's not super trivial, but it is easy. And why am I'm saying this? So if we take data scientists as an example, because it's the closest to my heart, because I'm a data scientist, right? So we all know those, we all saw those nice, neat Venn diagrams of data science. What is a data scientist? Well, it's a person who knows how to code, who knows some statistics, and who knows, has some domain knowledge. Right, and that's how I became data scientist. I never learned data science. And when I started working as a data scientist at Automatic, I think 1 year after that, I asked for anonymous feedback. So I suppose that you still have this tool for anonymous feedback. And I had several responses in that feedback, that the request that I asked for, that were roughly said, your analyses are fascinating, although I don't understand 95% of them. And then at the beginning, I was very pleased with myself. Well, everybody likes to hear that their analysis is fascinating. But then I realized that if nobody understands me, I mean, why am I there? It's like, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? And you can say the same thing about any type of professional analysis that you are doing. If you work hard and nobody is around who understands you, do you actually work? So here I am. I know some coding. I know some statistics. I have some domain knowledge. That's why I can call myself a data scientist. But what about communication? And communication is the hardest part. Because if you take a look at this Venn diagram here, if you take the entire population, world population, and you pick a random person, and you teach this random person a little bit of coding, a little bit of statistics, and a little bit of, I don't know, social network analysis, and boom, that person is already a much better data scientist than the vast majority of the human population. Because the vast majority of human population doesn't know this combination of skills, doesn't have this combination of skills. But communication is completely different. We constantly communicate. So it is relatively easy to gain advantage in coding, statistics, and any type of domain knowledge over the majority of population, but it is very hard to gain advantage in communication over people, because we constantly communicate. And but we communicate sometimes in very non-optimal way. And that's why most of you, me including, most of us suck relatively. So we are very good at communication, but if you want to stick around, if you want to make a difference, you have to be much better in that, right? And that's why we end up, let's say, with data visualization, we end up in all kinds of very good-looking graphs that incorporate inside tons of domain knowledge and tons of super niche professional knowledge. but this knowledge remains in the heads of the creator of the graphs most of the time. And just this knowledge doesn't make any difference most of the time. Why is that? Because they do not convey the main thing. The main thing is not the main thing in those graphs. And that's how you work hard and apply every piece of information that you know. And then you hear that, well, it's a nice graph, yeah, but I have no idea what you're talking about. And this is actually pretty sad. And that's why there's currently a claim in the market of communication and in the market of like workplace. When people are talking about the workplace, the future workplace, they're talking about storytelling not as a soft skill, not as something that is nice to have, but as a fundamental skill that is absolutely required for any professional, like knowledge professional. Because without good communication skills, the chances that somebody will replace you with a robot are much higher. Okay, and the good news is that it's you don't have to be like the best communication person in the world. It's enough that you are you are better in communicating than your coworker or teammate to get the promotion or to skip the round of cutoffs or to be considered as a better employee. And if you don't do this, I will do this, and then it's a competition. So somebody will we don't have to outrun the lion, the metaphorical lion. We only have to outrun our friends and coworkers in order to be better than them. And when everybody starts trying to outrun their friends, it's like our collective communicational skill will improve much better than we will outrun the lion. Okay? So this is my claim about us sucking in communication. Not only data visualization, any type of professional communication. And now let me show you what, like I will put a mirror next to you, and I will show you like a typical day of a data scientist and how we end up being bad in communication. So what we typically do, let's say I have some results and I visualize those results and I have this nice graph, right? And I decide to improve this graph and to add some more information to this graph in order to make sure that my results make sense. Okay, so if you take a look at this code snippet, I change my function from visualize stuff to visualize with diagnostic stuff. And now I look on my results and I say, okay, well, the picture is very nice, but I would also like to see some metrics, like, all right, so I add some metrics on my graph. And usually we don't run only one analysis, right? We have several setups from our machine learning algorithms. We have different types of data pre-processing. We have different types of information sources. So we work hard. So we have a nice function that runs in a loop, and it tests different settings and generates different graphs so that we know how so we can select the best performing method or select the best performing pre-processing method or whatever, right? So now we have all our results next to our, in front of our eyes. And then somebody asks you, you have to give a presentation right now, right? Because you were very busy doing analysis and you don't have time to play with those like stupid things like a presentation. So what do? We select the best performing result. We open our PowerPoint or any slide program, and we paste our graph. and we are mostly done, right? But we notice that this PowerPoint or any other slide program says, click here to add title. So that's what we do. We have a call to action, we act, right? So what we do, we add a title. And since in this case, I was creating a prediction, like a prediction method, my title would be observed versus predicted. It's a nice title. And now let me ask you, what is the main thing here? And the main thing here is lost. The main thing here is that I worked hard and you have no idea what is it that I want to tell you. So I will obviously try to explain you what my point is, but this current piece of communication does not convey the main thing. And this is the main thing. So if this is not what you should do, what should you do, right? And before I tell you what you should do, I would like to mention this book, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's a Nobel Prize winner, and his main theme of his lifetime research is that thinking is hard. What he says is that basically that we have like two brains in our head. One brain tries not to think, and it is the fast decision-making system, and we have a slow decision-making system that is lazy, and we don't like to it's not lazy. It's expensive. We don't like activating it. So we tend not to think if we can. So if it's possible not to think, we tend not to. On the other hand, reading is much easier, right? If you see a piece of text in front of your eyes and the text is relatively short, it's much easier to read this text than to think about it. Not only that, there is a phenomenon that when you see a text, most of us tend to subvocalize it. Subvocalization means that you actually, your mind, your brain actually reads the text in your, like inside your mind without moving your lips. It's like subvocalization. You actually hear the voice of yourself saying this text, provided that it is short. And of course, provided that you can read it, because if it's written in a language that you don't understand, it's just a set of meaningless pixels, right? So let's take a look at this slide that we created a couple of minutes ago, and let's examine it. It contains a lot of text, right? So right now, if you try to explain your point and you show this graph to your colleagues or your peers or to potential customers or potential investors, it doesn't matter what you are saying. Their eye will try to read this text, and their mind will be partially busy with reading this text. So instead of helping you, this slide distracts your audience from your message. Now, not only that, you can see that the two titles are a little bit contradicting. So on one hand, you see that the title says observed versus predicted, but I mean, what does it mean? So if you're a data scientist and you already saw graphs like this beforehand, you already know this by looking at the graph. And if you are not a professional from this particular field, it says almost nothing to you. And I'm like, and especially those cryptic numbers that we see at the upper part of the graph, like this row and Greek numbers and Greek letters and numbers. What do they tell you? So I know that most people, when they create graphs like this, they keep those numbers in order to be able to tell them to the audience, so that they don't forget the small pieces of small details, like the details. But it's not your audience's fault that you can't remember some numbers or can write them down on your in a notebook, right? So by only removing those conflicting parts, the parts that nobody needs to see, you already improve your graph. Your graph now has less text. You force your audience to read less text, and this quiet subvocalization voice in your audience's minds is quieter, and their minds is more open to hear you. Okay, and another thing is that, okay, so if you already have this place on your slide to put your title, keep the main thing. Right now, this title says nothing, because if you are from this field of data analysis, you already know that this is an observed versus predicted graph. You can see it. And if you are not a data analyst, but you are still interested in this topic, it just doesn't add you any knowledge. Okay? So instead of describing the what are you showing to your audience, describe so what. What does that mean? And I will give you some examples. So instead of telling this is data dynamics, well, I know that I can see that this is a dynamic graph, right? You can tell our data is highly seasonal, for example, right? Now I know what you want to tell me. And now, even if I'm not listening to you because I'm a little bit busy with my own problems. Maybe I'm reading my text messages, or I'm hungry, or I can't hear you well. The fact that I can see this short and descriptive title in front of my eyes means that I already understand you much better, and you're communicating with me in a better way, right? And the same is here. Instead of saying, well, this is your ECG, you can tell me there are no signs of arrhythmia or QT prolongation, okay? And if I'm not a medical professional, you can tell me you're okay. So it's the same piece of information that you are presenting to your audience, but you're communicating it in a much better way, right? So instead of saying here, this is a prediction performance, you can say, well, our model is excellent model performance. And right now, this is the starting point of your audience, of your discussion. And the main thing, if your main thing is to tell that your model performs in an excellent manner, put this main thing on your title slide. And I'm not talking only about title slides, but also if you are creating like a technical report and you have a caption, instead of starting this caption with some very trivial description, like in this case, observed versus predicted, start it with a conclusion, good agreement between the model and the predictions, or whatever it can be. So right now, in this example, the main thing becomes the main thing. Okay, so why is writing conclusions is such a good idea? Again, for three reasons. It convinces your audience, it disciplines you, and another very good reason is that it puts you in danger. And you might think of it as a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing, and I will explain it in a minute. So let's talk about convincing. I already told you about this subvocalization phenomenon, right? So when you present a piece of text to your audience, there is a quiet voice in everybody's head that actually says what you wrote in this text. And that means that your audience will be more likely to believe you or to accept your point of view. It's like manipulation, right? You can, I mean, it's a powerful tool. You can abuse it, and you can use it for a good reason. It's a tool, but this tool is super powerful. So if you have a piece of data visualization, a graph, and you manage to put your conclusion as a title of this graph, your audience will be more likely to believe this conclusion, or to their starting point will be your conclusion. They will be primed to your conclusion. So yeah, some people will abuse it. Try not to abuse this tool, but some people will use it for the global good, right? So if I want to convince you that I'm a good person, I will show you my picture and you will read Boris Gorelik is the best. And right now, that's what you think about me, right? And the same goes here. I show you a graph and you already see that. So your starting point here is that the model performance is excellent. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. So now if you are my audience, it is your turn to exercise your critical thinking, but your starting point is what I decided it to be, right? And again, this is from my presentation that I did a couple of years ago when I worked at Automatic. Again, the title here is Authors Who Give More Likes Survive Longer. Why did I put this title to this slide? Because they wanted to convince the audience, and the audience were bloggers and blog developers, to actively participate in a social network called WordPress.com, right? And again, a title can go, it can be a title in a slide or a caption in your blog post. They work the same way. So you have this piece of, you have this opportunity, use it. Tell what you think. Tell the conclusion of your graph. Okay, and a couple of years ago, even before I worked at Automatic, I did a consulting job for a company, for a data science group in a large telecommunication company that faced some churn problem. So their customers would buy a plan and then they would cancel it. And this is a reconstructed graph of this churn. It's not an actual graph, but it's based on true life. And this is the graph that I wanted to put in their presentation. As you know, when you start your presentation about what you did to reduce the churn, you present the general picture, and you tell your audience, this is how our weekly churn pattern look like. And I suggested to replace this title by a meaningful title that gives a conclusion. So my suggestion was, act fast, 50% of churners leave after 8 weeks. And actually the person with whom I worked was very happy, and that person adopted my suggestion and put it into the presentation. And when he presented this presentation to as a drill to his team lead, the team lead said, "Are you nuts? We cannot put this title in our presentation because we don't have enough information after 8 weeks. Our model does not work with information less than 10 weeks." So I said, no problem, just the same data. We have time to react. 50% of churners stay for at least 8 weeks, right? So it's like you can say, yeah, it's a little bit cynical of me to manipulate the titles in order to move your conclusions, but it's a tool, right? They didn't adopt my suggestion, other suggestion. They remained with this dull title, weekly churn. But it's a tool. You can abuse it, but you can use it for good reasons. Okay? So the first reason is to convince. A meaningful title convinces much better. The second reason is that once you put a title on your slide or on your graph, it disciplines you. When you see your own conclusion on your graph, you are forced to ask yourself, does the graph say what I say that it says? Right? So if I, as a data scientist, I create this graph and I tell to the world, this graph represents excellent model performance, and then I look at this graph and I say, actually it doesn't. So maybe my conclusion would be our model needs improvement. Okay, now it's much better. But maybe the main thing in my graph is that the model is never wrong by more than $10, for example. And now that I look at this graph and I look at this conclusion, I might realize that this graph does not show this. So the fact that the model is never wrong by more than $10 is shown on the small subgraph at the bottom. So if I realize this, I change my graph such that I actually show the model is never wrong by more than $10. And now the main thing becomes the main thing. And in a recent blog post that I did, posted a couple of days ago, I showed a population diagram of the world, right? And I wanted to compare the life expectancies of men and women. So my point was that, my point was that there are more men that are born, but less men survive. But now I'm looking at this graph and I see that this graph doesn't say this. So I reversed the bars, and now this graph became much better. And now I can even concentrate on the differences instead of the actual numbers. And I can compute the differences and present only the differences themselves. And this process was initiated, this process of improving, of distillating my point was initiated by the fact that I wrote down my conclusion that I wanted to convey. So we have this convincing part, we have this discipline part, and we also have this thing that writing a conclusion puts you in danger, which is a good thing. So right now, I would like to ask Charles, do we have some more time because of the limitations of Zoom?
I think we're good.
We are good. Okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about danger. Karl Popper, he was a very important philosopher in the 20th century. He claimed that a good scientist has to make claims that future observations might show to be false. It's not an actual citation, but it's the gist of his claim, right? So if you are doing something and you are not ready to make a claim that future observation might show you to be false, it means that you did nothing useful. As simple as that. If you are not prepared to put your reputation, your professional reputation in danger by claiming meaningless claims, that means that you are not doing your job well. Okay? Nissim Taleb from this Skin in the Game book, he claims that if you give an opinion and someone follows it, you are morally obligated to be yourself, and to be exposed to its consequences, right? So that means that if you are putting a bold statement to your results and you say, for example, this is my model and this model performs excellent, has an excellent performance, or this model will solve the problem that we try to solve. That means that you are putting your professional professional name, your reputation in danger. Everybody knows that. That means that people respect you more, and they treat your claims in a more respectful way. Or they will think that you are full of shit and they will disagree with you. Either way. But you cannot do your job well without, in my opinion, right? You cannot do your job well as a professional in any knowledge-based field without making bold claims, without making claims that future observations might prove you wrong. So these are the three reasons. You will convince your audience like it's more likely that you will convince your audience. You will be much more disciplined, and you put your reputation in danger, which means that it is easier for you to convince people, and it forces you to be more disciplined. Right? So we have a recursive list. But most of it's fast. Writing a conclusion is much faster than creating a neat-looking graph. So on your left, you can see some piece of code that I used to create a neat-looking graph, to clean all the noise, all the excessive lines, to move the dots in the right to the right position. It takes a lot of time. Writing a good title takes half a minute. Just you think of a good title, you write it down, and you're done. So not only it convinces, it's a better convincing tool, it's a disciplining tool, you put yourself in danger in a good way, but it's also super fast. Right? So I urge you, after this talk, just add meaningful titles to your pieces of data visualization, to your graphs, to your blog posts, to anything. Because if you do any, it doesn't matter what job you are performing. If nobody understands you, it's like you did nothing. And I know that you are very busy. Most of us are busy. But please, if you're already creating a title, try very hard not to write a title that is self-explanatory or that does not convey any additional information to your audience. Create a title that says the conclusion of your work, and not just describes what everybody already sees. And most important, visit my site and keep in touch. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have some time for questions.
Yeah. Demet, I can't hear you.
It's like I was doing the typical conference thing of not really a question, more of a remark.
Yes.
But I think that was fascinating.
Thank you.
And so I specifically liked when you said that you can use this as a tool for convincing. What would you think about going one step forward and being like, you must use this? So if your graph doesn't have a conclusion, you can't publish it.
Well, I was thinking one step forward is to hypnotize the audience, like a pendulum. No, but the thing is that sometimes there is no conclusion. So, for example, like you are like in that example with the weekly churn patterns, you're giving a bird's eye view over your problem. It doesn't have any, like, what is the conclusion? I don't know. It's just that it's the way it is. So sometimes, like you present a problem and you show this is how our world look like. If there is no like a very specific point there, it might be not
But
worth.
is that ever the case? Because there's so much bias in data work and data visualization that it is never just what the world looks like. There's always something.
Yes, but well, I mean, try to reimagine this bar plot with shown patterns. What is the conclusion there? Well, the conclusion was that act fast, but no, we can't put this, and time to it looks like a little bit manipulative. So in most cases, I would say yes, work very hard in order to create a title, but don't kill yourself if you can't. Right? But if you're a team lead, you can you always have to demand titles from your people who work for you. Well, yeah. Okay.
Have
More
you ever?
questions? Yeah.
Have you ever gotten pushback from reviewers about, oh, your title is too opinionated, or, you know?
No, I was once when I told you I teach data visualization. One time, one of my students told me that she learned that she took a course in philosophy of science, and according to what she knows, a good scientist is supposed to present the information, but never to impose their views. And I think that either she misunderstood or she was taught incorrectly. No, most of the time nobody pushed me back, but you know, people are shy, and it doesn't mean that I am always correct, right? But it never fired back, so not yet.
And what is your opinion? So I think there's like a tension between what you're suggesting and where the industry is moving towards with sort of like dashboarding solutions, where you can't really have this type of descriptive work, right? Because
right. So a dashboard is a different piece of communication. Here I'm talking about communicating the results, your conclusion, right? And a dashboard is a diagnostic tool. So you can think of, so if your algorithms are smart enough, algorithms that serve this dashboard are smart enough to identify conclusions live, right? And put them on the dashboard, it's okay. So for example, I don't know if you have an anomaly detection system that is smart enough to detect anomalies, and it like I don't know, danger. Okay, so then you have to think about it and implement it. But right, a dashboard is not always meant to convey conclusions, but it's a diagnostic tool. Okay, if you look at the dashboard and you identify something very odd or something very strange or very optimistic happens with your organization, you can take a screenshot and then put a nice conclusion and send it to everybody in your company, right? It's a more it's a scenario that I can see. Cool. So thank you for having me. It was very nice to see you.
oh, thank you. That was amazing.
And yeah, and if you have any data visualization questions, you have my email.